All right. So I'm gonna start the class off by asking a fun little question. So does anybody know what pattern that this shirt is? Okay. Okay. So yes, this shirt is actually stripes. So the pattern on this shirt is striped. So today we're going to be reading A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon, and we are going to be going over the traits of the characters in this book. So you can pull out a piece of paper, and on one side you're going to put traits, and you can put the character's name as we go along, and you can put the traits of each character. So we're going to go ahead and start off. This is called A Bad Case of Stripes, and it's by David Shannon. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. So right off the bat, we see that Camilla, right here, Camilla, is worried about what everybody thinks of her. Camilla is being self-conscious. She's worried about what others might say. Okay, so on the trait 1, you can put Camilla, and Camilla's being self-conscious. Today, she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide on what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. Okay? So now how is Camilla acting? She can't decide on what she wants to wear. Okay, so what would be a good character trait for that? Okay, so indecisive. She's being indecisive. You could put that as a character trait for Camilla. So you can label it number 2, or you can do bulleted, put a bullet and put indecisive for Camilla. Okay. So she put on a pretty red dress and she looked in the mirror. And then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried. "You are completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Miss Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered. "But just look at me." "You get back in the bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Okay, so how was the mother acting? Okay, so yeah, we can say that she's being bossy, but maybe what's another word for that? Maybe she's being a little controlling. Maybe the mother's being controlling. We could put that. Okay, so Camilla's mother, and right here, she is being controlling. She told her to get back in bed this instant. She's being bossy. Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That's Camilla. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he explained. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any cough? Sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Miss Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that you should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon, and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out into stars. Okay. So it says right here the students called her Camilla Crayon. Is that very nice? That's not very nice. So they're being mean to Camilla. So what is another word for mean that we can use as a character trait for the students in Camilla's class? Okay. So maybe they're being unfriendly. The students are being unfriendly to Camilla. They're being unkind. Okay. Put that. They're being impolite. Means they're not being very nice to her. They're not treating her with respect. Gonna put that down. So Camilla's peers are being unfriendly. The other kids thought that this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard!" and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on the TV. So they're still being very unfriendly, unkind to Camilla. Okay. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Miss Cream," he said. "I am going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those drops may be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her, and now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Okay, so let's talk about how the dad's acting. So that's him right there in the picture. It says, her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you?" So how is he acting if he's being really nice to her? Maybe he's being helpful. So he's being helpful. Maybe he's being compassionate. He's being really kind to her and understanding what she's going through is hard. Okay? So on this one, let's put Camilla's dad, and let's put compassionate. Let's put compassionate and kind. Okay, so let's spell that. COMPASSIONATE. But compassionate for the father. Okay? And kind. And helpful. Okay? Here's the next picture. Okay, here we go. Well, yes, I see, Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." Okay? About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grope, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialist went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grope. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one of each before bed," said Dr. Grope. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. Okay, so here's the doctors, and they're doing all the tests on Camilla. So, maybe we can describe the doctors. Do they know what's wrong with Camilla? I don't think they know. They don't know what's going on with her. So maybe they're confused. Maybe that's one of their traits altogether. So put in the, let's say the doctors, and then in the trait box, let's put confused. I think that's a good one. Okay, let's do the next page. There's Camilla. Okay. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she didn't feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Miss Cream called, but this time instead of the specialist, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord and Dr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers, and then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. "It might be a virus," he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. "Or possibly some sort of bacteria," said Dr. Mellon. "Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails." "Or it could be a fungus," added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla and then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers again and we'll be right back." So they're going to go over the numbers again back at the lab. So that's them. So they still don't know what's wrong with Camilla. They're still confused. They're uncertain. So let's put that as one of them, a trait. The doctors, the experts, we should put experts, are uncertain. Okay? So it says the experts looked at Camilla and then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers again, back at the lab." Dr. Gord explained, "We'll call you when we know something." But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. So the experts are uncertain. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionalists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. "Close your eyes," she said. "Breathe deeply and become one with your room." "I wish you hadn't said that," Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. "What are we going to do?" cried Miss Cream. "It just keeps getting worse and worse." She began to sob. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the environmental therapist. So let's talk about her a little bit. The environmental therapist, it says, the therapist screamed and ran from the house. So maybe she's scared. Maybe we should put that. Let's use a trait. She is afraid. She's alarmed. So let's put those, afraid and alarmed. So we're going to put the environmental therapist is afraid and alarmed. Here's the next page. At that moment, Miss Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and as sweet as a strawberry. "Excuse me," she said brightly, "but I think I can help." Okay. So she's friendly. There's Camilla again. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. "My goodness," she said with a shake of her head. "What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I have ever seen." She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. "Here," she said. "These might do the trick." "Are those magic beans?" asked Mr. Cream. "Oh, my, no," replied the kind old woman. "There is no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans." "I bet you'd like some, wouldn't you?" she asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big, heaping plate full of lima beans, more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. "Yuck," she said. "No one likes lima beans, especially me." So let's talk about Camilla now. So in the beginning of the book, it said that Camilla Cream loved lima beans. So that means that Camilla is not telling the truth. So what's another word for that? Camilla is being dishonest. She's not telling the truth. She's being dishonest. Okay? So it says, "Oh dear," the old woman said sadly. "I guess I was wrong about you." She put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she had been going through. She finally could not stand it. "Wait," she cried. "The truth is, I really love lima beans." "I thought so," the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Said Camilla. So, how has Camilla changed? How has her trait changed? She went from being dishonest to truthful. So, write that down. Camilla's being truthful. She's being honest now. She changed her mind. Okay. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. "I am cured," she shouted. "Yes," said the old woman. "I knew the real you was in there somewhere." She patted Camilla on the head, and she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Okay. So let's talk about the old woman. She came to help Camilla, right? So she's really nice. Maybe we need to put her trait down and say that she is helpful. Let's put helpful for her. She came and helped Camilla. She was nice to her. Okay, here's the next page. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never even had a touch of the stripes again. Okay? So now Camilla's feeling good about herself. Camilla is confident. So the last page will put Camilla is feeling confident. She is happy now. So now that she's happy, she is content. 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 Okay? So that is the end of the book. So we have filled out the character traits. And that is A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. Okay? Alright. So now that we are done with the book, we're going to review a little bit. So, at the beginning of the book, I asked you to pull out a piece of paper, and on one side put the trait and one side put the name. I want you to flip the paper to the back, and then I want you to write me a small little paragraph about what the difference between the trait of the beginning of the book is with Camilla, and then at the very end of the book, what is her trait difference? How is she acting in the beginning to how she acts in the end? So I just want you to write a small, short little paragraph on the back. Whenever you're done, give me a thumbs up. Okay? So everybody is done. What I want you to do is I want you to get with your partner that was assigned at the beginning of the year. I want you to get with your partner, flip over your paper, and tell them the difference between Camilla's character trait in the beginning and Camilla's character trait at the very end. Okay? So, Camilla, in the beginning, her character trait, let's see, she was indecisive. Remember, we had that on the front. She couldn't decide on what she wanted to do. She was a people pleaser. She was very self-conscious. Okay, and by the time we get to the end of the book, somebody raise their hand from one of the groups and tell me how it differs from the end. So yes, at the end of the book, Camilla is being very confident. She is just fine with the way she is. She's happy that she is back to normal. And I bet even though the kids still think she's a little bit different, she's still confident in the way she is, okay? So that is the difference between the beginning and the end of the story, okay? With the character traits. Alrighty. Alright.